Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and with me today I have
Adam Auer, President and CEO of the Cement Association of Canada.
And we're here to talk about a new initiative called Concrete Zero. That's a good place to start. What is Concrete Zero?
Well, Concrete Zero is our industry's action plan to get to net zero, that is zero emissions concrete by 2050. So it's both, I'd say, a story of the progress that we've made already as an industry, but also a declaration of if you will, of a commitment and the possibility to reach net zero by 2050 with milestones in 2030 and 2040 along the way. So it's sort of the foundation of both what we've done and what we're going to do next in terms of offering solutions to climate change.
Okay, and let's start with that progress. Concrete is literally one of the oldest technologies in the world, and it's also the third largest industrial energy consumer and second largest CO2 emitter. So what progress have you made to work past that? Because I'm sure there's a lot of inertia given it's been around for literally thousands of years.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we like to say concrete is the most widely used building material in the world. We use twice as much concrete as all other building materials combined. We've been using it since ancient times, as you mentioned. I think it's just a good sort of symbol of how essential it is to the modern world. But yes, it comes with a significant GHG footprint. About 7% of global emissions come from the manufacture of cement to make concrete. In Canada, that accounts for about 1.5% of our national emissions. And we've been on a journey to try and reduce that footprint for decades now. I would say on average globally, and it's reflective of the progress here in Canada, that we've seen our footprint reduced by about 20% since climate change really started hitting the radar in the 1990s. But clearly what we need now is something a lot more transformational. And in our action plan, we're kind of laying out, I think, a few different messages. One, that yes, there are technological investments that we have made as an industry and that we are continuing to make. And of course, there are new technologies emerging all the time that provide exciting emissions reductions opportunities. But to get to net zero, it's much more than about technology. It's about a new way of thinking about how we build effectively.
Well, let's start with technology. What are some of the technologies thus far you've been using, and what are some sort of glimmers of hope on the horizon for added progress?
Well, I think, I guess it starts with with many industries, just foundational progress on energy efficiency. Our processes get more energy efficient over time. There's, of course, always a business case for energy efficiency improvements, and that's been sort of one of the foundational areas of progress. But in terms of manufacturing, cement manufacturing specific technologies, I think the two main areas have been in the area of fuel substitution. So about a third of our emissions come from combustion. That's the heat energy we need to heat limestone in our kilns to make cement, and most of that energy is coming from fossil sources, coal, petcoke, natural gas. And there has been a move in Canada, as there has been around the world, to substitute those fossil fuels with lower carbon alternatives, including things like waste materials from construction demolition, for example. So there's lots of wood waste and residual plastics and even asphalt shingles and whatnot that have a large energy content and a lower greenhouse gas emission footprint at the end of the day. So we've been trying to make progress on that fuel substitution front. And then the other major lever is sort of a material efficiency type strategy where we're trying to reduce the amount of clinker, that's the GHG intensive ingredient in cement, while producing cements of the same sort of performance and quality that we're all used to. So we call that the clinker ratio, trying to reduce the clinker ratio, and that extends both to cement formulations, but also effectively to the amount of clinker that ends up in our concrete at the end of the day. And so we introduced a number of years ago, as one example, Portland limestone cement, which reduces the amount of clinker in cement by up to 10%, and you get about a 10% reduction in greenhouse gases as a result of that as well.
And just in terms of best practices, because I mean, yeah, technology is obviously an integral part of this whole thing, but also you've got to approach it differently. So what are some of the different approaches? What are some of the ways people used to approach this, and have they changed their behaviors to sort of account for this?
Well, I think this is what the action plan kind of describes really interestingly, is that the construction industry is a conservative industry by nature, and that sort of makes sense. You want your buildings to stand and to be safe, and to be able to withstand the calamities that it might face, earthquakes, fires, etc. You want your bridges to continue to operate, and also to be able to take the loads that it's designed to take. So, the construction industry uses what it knows works. And when you start to introduce any kind of novelty, it's inherently seen as a risk. And this has been, I think, sort of one of the underappreciated barriers to greenhouse gas reductions in our sector, is just the reticence of the market to accept innovation in the name of carbon, right? So we're starting to see that change. There's a lot of developers, architects, others out there who are looking at what we would call the embodied carbon of their projects, so the carbon emissions associated with the materials that they're using. But it is slow to change. Even with that Portland limestone cement that I mentioned, it's fully adopted in Canada's building codes, and in fact, it's a cement that's been used in other areas of the world, including Europe, for decades. But it's taken, a good 10, 15 years for it to get to a high level of market adoption in Canada, just because of the process of people getting comfortable with it. Specifiers in particular need to be comfortable with what they're specifying for their projects. And so as we look to go deeper, I think that's going to be one of the big barriers we have to overcome.
Okay, and one of the other barriers is, I would assume concrete is not just one. It's not like Ford and GM or something. It's it's 3 or 4 big companies. It's a whole bunch of different companies at a whole bunch of different scales. So Concrete Zero is a group effort. How do you get a group to act sort of in unison on this?
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the things that we're most proud of, really, is that we were able to get broad collaborative consensus across the industry, and we did that really by starting from the very ground floor in having that collective conversation. This wasn't just one cohort of companies that was pushing a net zero agenda. It really was, a discussion that's been percolating for, the better part of a decade, I would say, with a slow, actually, I don't want to say slow necessarily, but with a lot of work going into sort of building consensus of what that means, both from the perspective of the big multinational cement producers, who are all also vertically integrated, and so in the concrete business as well, but also to account for the fact that a huge part of the industry is they're SMEs, they're small community-based producers, and we felt very strongly that unless we could come up with a plan that was inclusive of everything from the large producers right down to the smallest producers, that was a critical component of our success. But there is, there's a culture in the industry. I mean, I think we all have this sense of pride that we're community builders. If you look around in any community where you may be living in Canada or in most places in the world, you can see the fruits of our labor, if you will, everywhere. I mean, concrete, going back to the opening, is the most used building material on the planet, and it really is everywhere in our lives. And I think as folks who work in the industry, there's a certain pride that comes with that, and also now a certain recognition that we are going to be responsible for ensuring that our buildings and infrastructure are capable of meeting the demands of a more extreme climate. But at the same time, that we need to do it in a way that's, takes responsibility for our contributions to climate change through the emissions produced to manufacturing our products. So I think there is sort of a, embedded in the culture of the industry, this really sort of solutions-oriented mindset and, wanting to kind of preserve our position as really important community builders.
One of the things about concrete is it is sort of, in a way, its own form of carbon capture, but when you demolish it, it does releases the carbon. So what has the industry done sort of to address that part of the problem? Because you've mentioned all the stuff you're doing sort of on the input side, but what on the extreme output when you have to knock down a concrete building, how do you deal with that?
Well, actually, when you knock down a building, it does not release CO2.
Okay.
In fact, it absorbs even more CO2 because in the process of making cement, you're driving the carbon out of limestone, and that what's left in the cement, it wants its carbon back. So over time, standing infrastructure will absorb a fairly significant amount of CO2, and when you demolish that structure, you're actually increasing the surface area of the concrete and facilitating additional absorption of CO2. So the challenge for us on the demolition side is less a CO2 challenge, although we do want to kind of think about how we might optimize that reabsorption of CO2 at the end of life of infrastructure. The real challenge is, can we find better uses for that demolished concrete than we have today? At the moment, we have a pretty high proportion of recycling of demolished concrete, but it tends to go into lower grade uses like roadbed, as a substitute for virgin aggregate, which is obviously environmentally beneficial. But part of the action plan does talk about, the potential of improving, or I would say, using higher value uses, like recycling rubblized concrete back into structural applications, or even being able to extract the cementitious content from demolished concrete infrastructure and using it to displace the need for new cement production.
Okay, and finally, if people want to learn about the Cement Association of Canada or Concrete Zero, where should they go?
Well, the best place to go would be concretezero.ca, which will bring you directly to our action plan and also link you into our broader Cement Association website, where you can find all sorts of other information about our sustainability plans and the industry writ large.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.